Hello, everybody. We are back with another movie review today, Kindergarten Cop, starring Arnold. This is actually the second Schwarzenegger movie we've discussed, which is crazy. Today's guest has some behind-the-scenes expertise. He's actually a TV producer. You may have also seen him on social media at Devin the Dad. He's also a father of two. This is a really fun discussion. I'm not really sure who this movie was for, Kindergarten Cop, but I really enjoyed watching it. I hadn't seen it before. So I really enjoyed watching it and breaking down some of the parenting and family lessons in it. I hope you enjoy the conversation. My name is Anthony Franzese. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast. Normally we interview working parents, but sometimes we have fun switching things up, talking about parenting dynamics in movies, and today's one of those days. If you enjoy the episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents. We are still working on that title, folks. My guest today, he is a reality TV producer, content creator at Devin the Dad, father of two. Ladies and gentlemen, Devin McGovern. Devin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited. I've been following what you're doing and successful working parents. Man, that is a whole. I think breaking down each one of those is like a whole show in itself.
Yeah, people often, feel like I don't know if I am successful, but I am a working parent. But just being a working parent, I feel like you got to have some success, right? Just showing up.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like even that, like working and parent, you're just like, what is this balance?
Yeah.
Please, somebody help us.
Yes, totally. Well, we can get into that. But today we're talking about the 1990 hit Kindergarten Cop. But before we do, would love to have you kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm Devin. So I grew up in Colorado, huge basketball fan, big basketball. I played most of my life, had offers to play in college. I was a big Lakers fan, which is funny because I grew up in Colorado. Now I live in California. And I always thought when I was a kid, I was like, I want to live in LA. I want to live in California because it was like Magic Johnson's Showtime. That was the big look at California. And sure enough, here I am. I moved to California to pursue the entertainment industry. I've done everything from stand-up comedy, where I toured and did some stand-up comedy for the troops overseas. I've done writing. Worked at a talent management company, and most recently been a producer in reality TV. Worked on the TV show Bar Rescue on Paramount. And then in there, I've also transitioned into being a social media content creator. It started very much with my wife pre-kids as a Instagram about fashion, what it is, because my wife and I both love fashion, dressing up. And since having kids and the pandemic, I realized I'm not dressing up as much. I'm not buying as many clothes. And our social media has kind of evolved into Devin the Dad, which is what has kind of, taken off and seen some viral hits, whatever that means recently, and just sharing what it is to be the ups, downs of being a parent and the comedy within it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about this movie today. You're the first guest I've had on to talk about movies that's kind of from the industry and know some of the behind the scenes stuff. So excited to hear, any thoughts you have from that lens. But Kindergarten Cop, 1990, when we were chatting about what movie to do, you had suggested this movie. I'd never seen it, so I really enjoyed watching it. But what's your relationship like with this movie?
I remember watching it as a kid. I remember watching it on TV. I remember watching it with commercials, and watching it now, I'm like, oh, that was censored. It was on television. So there's like these moments where I'm like, I don't remember seeing that. And then I'm like, oh, because it was on whatever, the network. And I loved watching it. It was a great, it felt like he was so funny. And as a kid, you're like, wow, if you had a teacher like that, that would be cool. This big, bodybuilder guy. So I remember watching it numerous times as a kid with my parents. And it's a great movie.
Yeah. And I hadn't seen it before. Like I was saying, I was born in 87. So I remember seeing it at the video store, the cover of it. And I don't know why this one just never, made it into the VCR. But I mean, around this time is peak Arnold. He did Twins, and then Total Recall, and then this, and then Terminator 2. So it's sandwiched in between two of his biggest hits. And then he did Last Action Hero after that, which was a movie from my childhood I remember quite a bit. But he's essentially being the Terminator in the first 10 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, exactly. You see, he's got the trench coat. He's going through the mall. It is exactly I wonder. I guess I don't know exactly. Like, I wonder if like they saw that and then the Terminator came from that, or whether it was already in the works and he had already probably auditioned or whatever. So he was already like in that mindset. I
Yeah.
don't know the exact timeline, but yeah, he was essentially at the very beginning, the Terminator.
Yeah, no, because the first Terminator came out a while before this, so I think they were just like, "Hey, can you be that for a little while?" That's why when I was first watching this,
Right.
I was like, "Is this just like a badass action movie?" Like, because you're thinking about him being a kindergarten teacher, so it really pivots after that.
Right.
So yeah, the movie kicks off. He's stalking the bad guy in the mall, and this bad guy Crisp kills an informant, and then Arnold's character is Kimball. He arrests him, and he's basically being the Terminator. One thing I really appreciated early on also is that he actually says he's from Austria. They're asking him like who he is, because in all these movies he does, like where he's like this comedic role, they never explain why he's just like this like giant Austrian man, like Jingle All the Way. They never really get into like why the dad is like this, and so
Right.
I was like, okay, well at least we're agreeing that he has a thick accent, and it's because he's from Austria.
Yeah, I think that worked perfect. I want to say, rewatching it now, the beginning of the movie was like taking me back, like seeing the mall, like
Yeah,
seeing that like hustle and bustle of like the 90s mall, 1990s mall. I'm like,
yeah.
oh man, that was a good time. I remember being a kid going with my mom, and the mall is different now. It's not
Yeah.
what it is.
I feel like you just wouldn't really film mall scenes anymore. It's just like not like the center of society anymore, like it was.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is not. And it was, I guess if you didn't grow up with it, is even watching it, there's no way to explain that feeling of being in a mall in the
No,
90s.
no, totally. I live out here in Jersey. There's actually this crazy mall called the American Dream Mall. I don't know if you've heard of it or you've perhaps been there, but they literally have like a roller coaster inside, and a snow, like a ski mountain. Like it's absurd. When you think of a mall, it's not what you think of, but it's
Right.
kind of how far we've come as a society.
Yeah, yeah. No, we've got one out in California. It's got like a carousel. And my girls actually, we went there for Easter. And I was just reminded yesterday in the car, she goes, "Can we go back to that Easter where they had the carousel inside?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, we can do that."
Yeah, I like that. So basically, they set up the movie pretty quickly after this. They catch the bad guy. They have to go. I was trying to figure out, like, they have to go to the school because that's where the bad guy's ex-wife has a son, and they want to get $3 million from. She stole $3 million from this guy that he's allegedly after, and for some reason, like, they need her to like have the money.
Right.
Like that part to me was like I was trying to understand why they needed her to have the money, but they want to get her to testify, and so they're gonna go with they give him a partner who's looks more like a kindergarten teacher, and she's gonna be the teacher or pose as the teacher, and then he's going to kind of try to identify the mom and get her to testify. So they're on the plane flying over. Now I have an 18-month-old daughter, so we've flown with her like 4 times now. You have How old are your kids?
5 and 2.
Okay, so he's got these kids like playing behind him and like annoying him. What's your strategy on a flight? Do you just do the iPad at this point? Like, how do you just let your kids just cry and not worry about it? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, so we've only taken 2 flights. We've got, I guess, the pandemic child who, we didn't fly because she's 5. Our first flight, we were going to go to Hawaii when she was like 9 months old, and
Mm,
the world shut down in 2020. That was going to be her first flight. So we
yeah,
didn't fly with her until recently. We went to Hawaii and it was a long flight. So with the 5-year-old, it's iPad. It's like
yeah,
we don't do a lot of media time at home. So like we give her the iPad, give her the headphones, and she's good the whole way. The 2
yeah,
year old, she actually she snacked and then napped
yeah,
and then would try and watch her sister's iPad, but didn't really care. So like as long as she had snacks, she was good.
yeah.
So those 2 flights we did well, but I just iPad. We did actually buy. I don't know if you know the Tony's box. It's like a little music box with characters.
I know that I have to get one. Yeah,
We did it, and it was like, just give her the iPad, because
yeah.
then we're like dealing with these little figurines and whatever. So iPad all the way.
I know it's something you don't want to rely on, but there are times when like I'll throw on like Miss Rachel or Sesame Street just because you just in a pinch you need it sometimes, right?
Exactly.
We and I feel like when you have a little kid, it is about like the nap time. We went to Costa Rica recently, and that was the biggest issue. It was like a 7 o'clock flight, so we were going to be like flying when she's in bed. So fortunately, it was a pretty empty flight, and we actually brought the car seat on, and just she slept in the car seat the whole way, so that really helped. But it's like timing the flights around naps and the feeding schedule does help.
Yeah, it does for sure. We just
Yeah,
did a Hawaii and Colorado where I'm from, and that was, they were pretty chill. So it was
yeah.
great.
So he's got these kids behind him, and he like literally just like takes the truck, like threatens the kid. I'm not sure where the parents are in this day and age, especially like they're
Yeah.
with the parents, I guess helicopter parents. I don't know if you're going to confront Arnold necessarily, but I feel like I'd be pretty pissed if he's like threatening my son.
To be totally honest, I would be like, why are you bothering that man? I
Yeah,
would
like
be like, thank you, sir. Are they
yeah,
quiet now? Like, thank you for but I think when I was watching that, I was like, oh man, he was so mean. And then as a parent, I'm like, I get it. You just like
yeah,
that constant, it was just kind of a metaphor for being a parent. Like that constant pounding on the back of your seat is sometimes how it feels like as a
yeah.
parent of a toddler. They're just like, hitting you nudgingly in the back repeatedly all day.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I feel like this movie is confused about is like what is Arnold's relationship with kids, because at this point they set it up where he clearly like is annoyed by them, but then you find out later he has a son, doesn't seem as much. So yeah, you'd think he would. When I see someone with a kid on a plane or anywhere, I like don't mind at all if the kid's screaming because I know how difficult it is, and you really feel more empathy for the parent than annoyance towards the kid. And I feel like he's kind of all over the place with how he feels about kids.
Yeah, and I think maybe they do. It might be the writing. I think also that's they're trying to throw you off a little bit. That at the beginning he's so far from kids to then be able to make him as this kindergarten teacher for it
Yeah.
to work. It's got to go like all the way to the extreme that basically he just doesn't like kids and doesn't want to be around them. And then it's funnier if then you're like, oh, and now you have to teach them.
Right. Yeah. Which I feel like just don't have him not have a son. I feel like that would have made more sense.
Yeah, totally.
So his partner gets food poisoning or some sort of stomach illness. So they're setting it up where she's not going to be able to be the teacher. But I mean, I've had food poisoning. Like, just wait an extra day. I don't know why they didn't just like be like, okay, maybe I won't go to school this day. I don't know how imminent it was. So they make Arnold be the teacher instead. But I feel like it could have easily been solved by like wait. It's not like she was like in a car accident. Like just wait an extra
Exactly.
day.
Just wait an extra day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just have another substitute for that one day, and then he comes in.
Right. Yeah. But then we wouldn't have had the movie, of course.
Exactly.
It was funny because my wife is in education, and the first thing she thought of was like they basically like had another teacher go on leave, right? And the principal's like all pissed. I had this great teacher go on leave for this big dude, and my wife's like, you would never make a teacher go on leave like that. You just have him like be an aide or like have him assist in the classroom. Like it was like totally think of that poor woman who just you never get to see her, but her career's like screwed over because of this.
Yeah, exactly. She's just done. Yeah, I always thought when I watched it, I was like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, where'd she go? They just literally like let her go for this without any like explanation or anything. And the principal,
Yeah.
it works and that for the story and that she's like super mad about it, but like it wouldn't just like disappear.
Yeah. So we get the scene where he is just like totally overwhelmed by the kids. They're kind of running the show. Now, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about because as my daughter's getting older and she's going to be that age soon, we're starting to deal with little tantrums and stuff like that. Like, I don't know how I would approach a classroom of like 30 kindergartners. Like, what's your strategy here?
So again, one reason why I picked this is my daughter is in kindergarten. So I
Uh-huh.
feel like I wanted to see it now in that lens of like having a kindergartner.
Yeah.
And I remember watching, and I was like, man, they're just so out of control. That's so not real. That's so like
Yeah.
Hollywood. And now that I have a kindergarten, I'm like, it's heightened, but like absolutely. That's exactly sometimes what it feels like on the inside. And I actually went to our classroom recently and did like a thing. They weren't as out of control, but when there's not a structure, which is great, he builds them into a structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's why it can be wild. It
Yeah.
literally feels like that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I never understood when I watched it before how true that is now.
Yeah. And, I'm curious, like, thinking about my daughter being that age, it was like, wow, I can't believe she's going to be this big one day and like have this like full personality and like just this full agency. Like it's probably cool to see that in your daughter. And then you have like your younger one is like similar to my daughter's age. So it's like, yeah, they're going to grow up and like be this little kindergartner one day.
Yeah, I mean it's cool because she's Yeah, we've got both to see, and they just when they develop these personalities, it's you see it like in these kids in the movie, like they have a personality, they've got this character, and then you relate it to your kids, and you're like, wow, they've got this little personality that other people see. Sometimes you forget when you're so close to it,
Yeah.
but they're like building this cute little personality. Sometimes cute, sometimes not cute. But yeah, she just, my 5-year-old, she just, grew up so fast. It's wild. It's wild to think, because again, I say pandemic baby or however you say it. We were home all the time.
Yeah.
It was great. I think when she was first born, I had to leave for a job for a show where I traveled about 3 months. So I missed, like the 3, 4, 5 month, which is not much.
Mhm.
And then after that, we were together all the time, home
Yeah.
every day. And I saw like her go and just grow. It was pretty cool.
Did she not go anywhere until kindergarten? Like, I guess you weren't doing daycare.
We didn't do daycare. We did TK. So yeah, TK. So
Hmm.
she did that for a year, but it was essentially just like them running around outside,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
being at the
yeah.
playground.
How was that first drop off? Like, that was we did daycare for like 6 months, and I was not well for that day.
We did a T before we did one TK that we tried out, and it was screaming drop off. We were 3.5, I guess, about almost 4 was when she first did it, screaming every single morning.
Mm.
And then we got our first school cough that lasted months.
Yep.
And and since then we're just in and out of sicknesses
Oh yeah.
all
Oh
the
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better to kindergarten, but like even this morning, it was, can you walk me all the way to class? I don't want to go to,
Yeah.
I was like, I empathize. I was like that. I didn't love leaving my parents. I wanted to be home, but then I had fun at school. But like, I totally get it. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. And my daughter, like, she couldn't talk, or she couldn't really like advocate for herself. So you just kind of drop her off and just wonder how she's going to do for the day. It was tough.
Yeah, that is tough. That's why we waited till she could she was potty trained, she could talk,
Yeah.
and then she kind of ran the show that we realized at one of her schools. So
Yeah. So his tactic in the first day is to just go get a ferret from the car to calm them down. I guess he keeps that ferret in his car. I don't think the ASPCA would appreciate that in 2025, but he seemed to have access to his ferret at all times. I don't know what it was doing.
I think I really related to that moment where he just like runs out and screams, because that's exactly what I feel like doing sometimes. I
Yeah.
wish I had the ferret option to that creative option. Sometimes it was such
Yeah.
a great like tactic. But
Yeah.
you're right, they wouldn't fly today. It would probably just be like a meme coin, like justice for ferret, because they'd end up like
Oh yeah.
taking it down, and then they turn it into a meme coin. Probably.
No, there's a few reasons this movie I think might get canceled, which we'll get into. Well, one of them is actually what I wanted to mention. So early on, we meet little Sylvester's mom, and she comes to him concerned that the son's playing with dolls, which you would never voice that concern, or you would never like see that on a movie today being voiced, right? Like especially like in kindergarten, it's like whatever. And also Sylvester's dad left him for another man, which I thought was progressive because she didn't really like say anything homophobic, right? It just was kind of like more of a fact. So I was like, okay, 1990, that was ahead of its time a little bit.
Right.
And then
yeah, it probably wouldn't fly today. But again, it teetered a little bit on like she was concerned because her pain was from him leaving.
yeah,
and it was like she was concerned for her son. So it was like
true.
a fine-ish line. Maybe they could get away with it. They probably would have to explain a bit more and not just like blatantly throw it out there like that. But yeah, it would be hard to get away with.
And then Arnold pointing out that he's just looking up their skirts. I don't know if that would be an assuaging reason anymore, but
right.
She seemed to be okay with that. The Pledge of Allegiance as well. Now they don't do that in my wife's school anymore. I feel like that's like, I mean, I grew up doing that. I don't know. Does your daughter do that in kindergarten?
So again, with a kindergartner, it's hard to understand what happens at school if the teacher's not. So you can ask. I'm pretty sure they do. However, it's like when they're walking in, it's not a full formal. It's like there's a time when the bell rings and drop off. So it's like the initial when kids are all, and they do it like over the loudspeaker, but it's like as kids are arriving. I don't believe it's as a formal hand to the heart kind of thing. It's more of an
Yeah.
informal, but I believe I've heard it during drop off.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's sort of there in an informalish way.
Yeah, I think you're just seeing it more and more get like phased out, or to your point, it's like a more of like a voluntary thing if anyone wants to do it.
Right.
So I hadn't seen this movie before, but then I realized there was like several classic lines I had heard, like when the little kid says, "Boys have a penis and girls have a vagina," and then the whole "Who's your daddy and what does he do?" scene. That was probably my favorite scene. And then you also get it's not a tumor, like all that, like kind of sandwiched into one package. I feel like those all like are still around.
Yeah, it's not a tumor is one of those that like if you hadn't seen it, you had heard it. You had heard
Yes.
that phrase during this time.
Yeah.
But you're right. Rewatching it, that scene with what the kids' dads do, my wife and I were like, did they feed him those lines? Was that like real? Like it was just, it felt so real,
Yeah.
and it was so funny. And
Well,
those,
a big theme of this movie is like divorce. I feel like, and again, like I I feel like it's a little ahead of his time. I mean, my parents were actually divorced in the '90s, and I just feel like it was a little less common. So you get like a lot of the kids. Well, one of the kids, I think, insinuates that his dad's a loan shark. One of them was like, "Oh, he drives a taxi in New York, and mom hopes he dies." Like one doesn't do anything after the crash. So there was a lot of like funny things that these kids were saying their parents did. One's a real sex machine.
right. Yeah, I don't think they knew what they were saying in some of
No,
them too. They were just reciting these lines to be funny coming out of the
yeah,
kid's mouth.
yeah, but a lot of unhappy marriages or broken marriages at home.
Right. Well,
Uh,
they kind of alluded that this was like the single capital. Like they kind of made
that's
that
right.
a
Yes.
bit of a character within there, which was kind of, I guess that's why they tried to make it make sense that she went there, that it was like a place that was comfortable, that all these
Yeah.
single parents went to a run away from.
Yeah, they never get into like, do you get divorced because you live there, or do you live there like after you get divorced? I don't know what the connection is.
Right. Right.
So then, yeah, he's getting all walked over, and he's just like, again, very relatable. He's just like passing out when he gets home. He's like so exhausted from what's happening, and he goes back to school, and he gets like super strict. He gets the police training out. He's got the whistle. I thought it was gonna be like too much, and then he was gonna have to like find some happy medium, but apparently, like the super strict cop attitude was working really well.
Yeah. That's like, now we do the gentle parenting.
Yeah,
And
right. Yeah,
sometimes, as you'll see when they become a toddler, like gentle parenting is great, but sometimes it doesn't work. I'm going to be honest.
yeah,
Or
yeah. So
sometimes you don't have a gentle parenting child.
do you like approach things from that lens? Like, do you try to approach things first in that way? Like, what's like kind of the framework for that?
Yeah, I think that is the initial. The initial is coming from an understanding of her feelings and trying to lead, but sometimes it's one of those where it's like putting your shoes on. Like you can gentle parents when you're trying to get out, but at some point you just have to we have to be there. There's a time we have to get to school. And you could, if we fully gentle parented, we'd never get out the door to school or anywhere. So I think there's a fine balance that we have to do.
Yeah,
And that's the initial approach. But yeah, it's really hard sometimes
yeah, no,
because what he did, and I think it was a great line in there, is like show no fear. And I think
Mhm.
that is so true. At least I've noticed with my kids that if you teeter on like a decision or like, we're turning it, no more TV, it's time. And then they're like, one more. And then you're like, okay, and you
Yeah,
kind of waver, like they smell that and they really
yeah,
do like latch onto that. So that idea of strength and not having, don't let them smell your fear is a real thing. I think,
yeah.
especially with kindergartners, it's what they are. And it's what I have.
But this didn't motivate you to go get a whistle on Amazon necessarily.
My wife did say maybe we need a whistle as we watched it.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
haven't
give it a
made the
shot.
purchase yet. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
bought it yet, but you never know.
maybe I should start doing like, instead of discussing the movie, we like act out you use the movie's tactics for parenting, and then discuss that and see how it goes.
That's funny. Like take a scene and be like,
Yeah,
"Hey, All right, what was one scene that impacted you? Did you implement that with your child? How did
Yeah,
that
yeah.
did it work as well as Arnold?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
yes, so yeah, the movie I'm not really sure who this movie is for because like at first it's like this crazy action movie, then it's this really silly comedy with the with the kids, and then it gets like really heavy. They have this like pretty intense conversation about divorce and like kids having kind of different ideas of what it meant, and again, a child divorce myself kind of bummed me out, and then it goes right into the Zach's dad, and like he's hitting the kid and the wife. I was like really heavy all of a sudden.
I guess it's one of those like it was our version when we were kids of like Deadpool. Like I look at that and I'm like, gosh,
Yeah,
this is pretty violent and
yeah,
intense.
yeah,
But like 11, 12, 13-year-olds are watching it and I was watching this as an 11 or 12-year-old. So I guess it's like that was our action movie.
yeah,
And then the emotions and all that, they're just going to go over your head. But
yeah.
it
Well,
did
that's the
feel a
thing.
little
Yeah.
violent. I thought when I was watching, I was like, I watched this as a kid. This is pretty intense. But I guess
Right.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm not sure if it's for kids or it's just supposed to be like a fun movie for adults, with kids in it. Do you have you done worked on any shows that had little kids on it? Like I was wondering if like how many takes they had to do with the little kids, or they just sort of like let them do their thing and captured things that kids naturally do.
I haven't worked with kids at all. My sister does. She works on a Disney Channel show,
Oh wow.
and they're pretty like they gotta be out depending on the age. Like they
Hmm.
can't work all day, so they are pretty like they don't really unless they're really funny. From what she's told me and I've seen, they don't just kind of let them riff unless they're maybe that age a bit. But like they gotta get it done and they gotta get them out of there or they gotta get them into school. So there's not like a lot of time to just like play around per se.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we've got our daughter, she's done some like audition stuff, has never booked anything, but I'm like, it's tough. Even just like getting, at this age to just get them out the door to school.
Yeah.
I can only imagine like them doing those lines like what their dad did. I'm sure that was probably like it feels like it would be a whole day thing just to get all those kids to get those lines and everything.
And I guess at that age, like, do you think like all those kids are just like the kids of parents who are, the kids obviously aren't like, maybe they are, but probably the parents are really encouraging them to like try some acting things at that point, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's one of those like there are they love art, they love performing. Like my daughter's she did the Wicked show last night. She brings out her little microphone and she sings every night, so
Cute.
like she's interested, so we're like sure, might as well, if she's already showing an interest in it. So I'm sure that's like those kids same type of thing, like they're already performing when they go to the park, they're singing and dancing, so might as well. Or back in the day when they would just get spotted at the mall, like that was the time when has
Right.
your kid ever thought about doing a TV show or a movie?
Right. Yeah. And I think back then the rules were less strict, like to your point. I think now it's like very limited hours they can be on the set, but I feel like I don't know if that was happening in 1990. So maybe it's a little more free for all.
Right, right.
So now Arnold gets close. No, you had seen this movie before. Did you remember that it was Joyce, the teacher, who was the mom?
Yeah, 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 like I remembered.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
didn't actually see that coming at first. I actually for some reason thought it was still the that original woman whose husband ran away with the guy. I thought that was a cover up. But Arnold kind of gets close to this woman, Joyce, who's one of the teachers, and goes to the house. And through this, the son kind of sharing, he's afraid of some bad guys, and they've been running from bad guys. He figures out that it's that she's the one. He gets out. Crisp gets out because his mom, who's just like this like criminal like older lady, poison again violent, like poisons this woman,
right.
poisons the other woman that was testifying, and so he gets out, and so now they're like, hey, Joyce, look, you got to come up with this $3 million. Again, it's like they'll only like give you immunity if you provide the money. I don't know what the cop's angle was there.
Yeah, I'm again watching it again. I was like, went over my head as a kid, but now again, I was like, what? She has to provide it? I guess I didn't understand that either. Didn't
Yeah,
totally make sense.
yeah. I guess they just needed some like it's like a MacGuffin.
Proof.
It's like a MacGuffin almost, right? They just needed some like plot device for like why they needed her to do it.
Right,
Because then it turns out the money is not even real,
right,
right? But
right.
then, but he's like still like, oh, well, I'll help you. So yeah, then we come into like, so first of all, it goes back into fun times. He's only seems to be teaching them phys ed stuff though. Like I don't know if like he didn't cover one these are the colors lesson, right? It was just physical activities. He's got them like marching and doing all kinds of stuff, but I didn't see him really do any curriculum.
Yeah. Well, they did Gettysburg Address. They did a
Right.
play.
That's true. The
Then when
Gettysburg Address.
they were marching outside, they were, I can't remember now. They were singing some sort of um, ABCs, or they were doing something when they were marching outside for recess. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
They were
he did Old McDonald at one point.
right.
I guess in kindergarten you're not learning much, but I thought it seemed like the curriculum was heavily based on physical activity and drills.
Yeah, I mean that's more fun than like reading. But they actually
Watching
do
history.
learn quite a bit in kindergarten.
Yeah.
My daughter, spelling, she's, trying to read, read signs when we're in the car. Like it was quick. It was like that transition from like last year where they're just like running around on the playground to like being in a classroom and, spelling and recognizing words. It's quite a bit. It happens fast.
You know what's funny? My daughter's in daycare, and the daycare is great. They don't give us a lot of updates on like what she's up to.
Right.
And she's coming home and like doing like signs, like baby sign language, and we don't know, and they didn't tell us that they taught her this. So for a little while, we're like Googling, trying to figure out like what she's requesting or what she's asking for. And you also realize after a few days she was calling water agua, and so like
That's so funny.
we've been trying to call it water, and she keeps saying agua, and then we realize, oh, you're looking for water. So they are teaching these little kids stuff, but yeah, I think it's important to let the parents know what they're learning.
Dual immersion daycare right there.
Yeah. And like, we'll play like a song, and then she'll like know like the hand gestures to it. And it's like, oh, like what other songs do you know?
That's cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. But yeah, so Chris gets out, he comes to steal the kid. And with this really intense scene, he kidnaps Dominic, the ferret bites him, and then Arnold kills him. And then Chris' mom is about to kill Arnold. He shoots him, and then the partners save the day with a bat. I mean, this is going to be so traumatic for these little kids. They're all kind of there. They all see him get pulled out in the stretcher. Dominic, especially. I mean, his life is shot, right?
Yeah.
And then they essentially set it up where like Arnold stays. He wants to be with the mom and like be with the kid. So like, it's like your stepdad like murdered your real dad in front of you. Like, I feel like you're gonna have a tough time with that one.
Right. I think again, I'm watching it. I was like, yeah, this feels a lot more traumatic than they're making it come across.
Yeah, not just a happy ending, like a pretty intense ending.
Yeah, and everything from like the moment of when they're freaking out about the fire drill, like the fire drill, obviously they built up for you that they're trying to figure that out, and then the actual one,
Right.
with smoke and water coming down, like that is already like a little bit for a kindergartner, like oh my gosh, trying to run through the water, and then this happens. I'm like. And then he stays, and then he's going to stay there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, man, these poor kids.
Yeah, I think all those kids grow up with like a lot of anxiety, and I think Dominic has like a real like a deep darkness in him, and that doesn't really translate well to his adult life.
Right. We need like Kindergarten Cop 2, the follow up, because they'd be
Right.
what, in their mid-30s or so.
Yeah, I'd love a legacy sequel to Kindergarten Cop, and it's like Dominic's like a criminal, and it's like what he's up to, and he's repeating the same mistakes his dad did, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. He
And
goes
like
undercover.
a really old Arnold like has to try and save him.
Yeah. He goes undercover as a kindergarten teacher, Dominic.
Yeah, and then that's kind of how the movie ends, right? Like Arnold decides he wants to be a teacher. I don't know if they're just gonna let him teach, or they have to get his degree first, because the principal realizes he doesn't have a degree. So he's just a teacher now. I don't know what the schooling is gonna be like for him, but they seem to just let him do it.
Yeah, because it's funny because it's such a shift. He was such a police officer, and he says that, my dad was, my brother was, it's a like, this is all he knows. And then to completely shift to like, nah, I'm just going to teach kids all day is such a massive 90s storytelling shift.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, do it. Totally get it.
Well, to me, I actually thought like, getting into some of the like the discussion questions, like life lesson from this, I feel like that's more popular now. Is just like dramatic career shift, right? Like instead of like, pursuing something you're more fulfilled by, like becoming a teacher because you've always wanted to, instead of this job that you didn't like. That he doesn't necessarily not like his original job, but I feel like in today's age, you're seeing a lot of people kind of reprioritize family life and change their careers to find something more more purposeful. I did it myself. I used to work on Wall Street back in the day, and I was like, Let me do something else.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. So you
Yeah.
did the commute. You went into the city.
Well, at the time I was living in Manhattan.
Oh, got it. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So totally, I appreciated that. But yeah, so on that topic, like what do you think aged poorly since 1990? What did not age well?
Well, the mom joke with the kids looking under and thinking his kid might be. I
Yeah.
think that didn't age well.
Yeah.
But I think there was elements like you're saying that did, like changing the job, prioritizing family. I think not all the films. Maybe that's how everyone was feeling, and that's why we were seeing it film but not doing it.
Hmm.
Whereas now people they're just legit doing it without any like Arnold movie to like give him that nudge. But it's been there. Everyone I guess has wanted that feel, and this they were just doing it in art. And
Yeah, like today, like you wouldn't need the whole like, oh, like I met this person, like I killed their dad and like I saved the day. Like he could just be like, I was a cop, I don't like this, I want to be a teacher, and like that's like a normal story now, right? You don't need this whole like dramatic action sequence.
right, right,
But I agree. Like I think that one kid's whole storyline, complaining about the boy playing with dolls, didn't age well. In general, I mean, this is 1990. Like the hair and the outfits, you don't see that stuff anymore. There's not a cell phone in sight, of course. Like no internet. Like that was all like just a relic of its time.
Oh, I think too when he confronts the mom towards the middle end, and she was like, just she told the boy, she's like, just go. I have to talk to your teacher. Just go for a walk, or whatever. I was like, what? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
just like send your, like nowadays there's a very strict protocol to even picking up your kids. You got a
Right.
number, and you got to make sure you're the right parent. Like this, she was just like, go for a walk. And even
Yeah.
that, like the teacher or the parent walking into the teacher's office, like we can't just walk into her kindergarten class and talk to the teacher.
No, well, the bad guy Crisp is just like in the principal's office at some point. Like no clearance, just like in the school, no, not a problem. Like yeah, like you're definitely passing many clearance points at this point to get that far.
Right. So yeah, that didn't age well.
Yeah. What did age well? Like, I mean, in a way, like just the topic of divorce. Like, I just feel like it was a little ahead of his time. With it's obviously very common these days, and so I feel like I appreciated that they normalized it and made it just kind of like a part of what kids deal with and how it can be tricky and complicated at times. Also, like, the fact that Arnold did like fully defend the domestic abuse issue, that was great. Like
Right.
he beats up the guy. He says, I'm going to press charges. So it was nice to see that they address that and then just have it be this like weird thing that was happening.
Right. And
And
that too is probably now would be a lot be swifter. It wouldn't be the teacher doing it. It would be, a whole big deal.
yeah, absolutely. Anything else for you on what aged well or didn't age well?
No.
What about like just parenting moment? Like what was like you think like the best parenting moment and worst parenting moment?
In the film?
Yeah.
Um, the best parenting moment was when she said, "Don't let him smell fear." That was that was one of those that like it's so true. The best parenting, don't let him smell fear. And the worst parenting moment, it's funny when she says that kindergartners are like the ocean, never turn back on them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's the worst, but we've all done it where you like, oh yeah, they're fine, and then they're not fine. They're
Yeah.
standing on a coffee table or doing something. So like, I wouldn't say that's the worst, but it's definitely the worst can happen and so relatable.
Yeah.
When you don't know.
I felt like whatever was going on with Arnold and his son, like, doesn't get resolved. Like, you would think that after this experience, he'd be like, like, yeah, maybe I could reach out to my son and like relate to him in a new way. But no, he's like, I'm just moving to this new town. I'm pretty sure his family doesn't live there, right? So he's just like moving on from his son to just be like with this new kid and this new mom.
Yeah, I guess it's him like being able to start over. Like he doesn't have any control over that, so now he has control over raising a kid, how he would want to. They never really explain the complications, but maybe it just seems like it's so out of his control. Now he has control of it, and he'll do it differently this time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Most realistic parenting moment for me was definitely like just being so exhausted at the end of the day, like just like passing out on the bed. And and having like genuine like concern about the next day. Like he was really worried about going back to school.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
did you have anything else, or is that what you were thinking too?
No, I think that one, but he also gets that relief of like being exhausted and going to sleep versus having to still like.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, there are moments where I wish I could just. I'm so
Pass
tired to just
out.
pass
Yeah.
out, but then you
Yeah.
still have to do bath and bed and books and
Yeah.
by the time you pass out, you don't even know, and you're just hoping that they're asleep before you are.
How was the jump from 1 to 2? By the way, kids.
People have asked that, and it's just for us. I mean, everyone has a different story. Everyone has their own children, but for us, it was like 100 times harder. Not
Mm.
like 2 times harder because it was another one. For us, for whatever reason, it felt like 100 times harder.
Yeah. No, I mean, I talk about that a lot on my show. Like people either feel like some people feel like, you're already in that mode, so it's not that crazy. And some people are like 1 to 2 is insane. And then 2 to 3 is a little bit easier because like 1 to 2 is the big jump. That's I've heard both.
Yeah, I've heard that too from people that 2 to 3 is the easiest. I don't think we're gonna necessarily find out. I think we're good with two, but
That's the other thing. You're not seeing that anymore. You're not seeing like people get 3, 4, 5 kids anymore. I mean, I've had a couple. I think the guest on my show that had the most kids was 5. But yeah, I feel like my parents' generation, like my dad's one of 4. Like like, I think it was just more common back then, and you're just like, all my friends seem to be calling it quits at 2.
yeah, yeah.
What was your favorite scene?
Favorite scene. I have to say my favorite scene is the beginning when like the it's the whole bit where where he runs out of the classroom and
Mm,
screaming, and it felt so relatable, and then he gets the ferret, and then it becomes the pet, but then also telling them to shut up, just screaming shut up, like
yeah.
there's sometimes moment as a parent where you don't know what to do but scream, and obviously
Mhm.
that is not the best. That's not the gentle parent. That doesn't help anyone. It just makes everyone dysregulated. But that's exactly how you feel. Sometimes you just scream, but that it felt so relatable that you just feel so dysregulated and you run out of the classroom screaming,
Yeah.
and it just feels like a moment of like, oh yeah, yeah. I'm not the only one that feels this. So you're seeing this in a movie, which means that somebody else has felt it, and it's so relatable.
Yeah. I like the who is your daddy and what does he do scene. I think it was fun to just have them like have these kids have these like silly backstories for their dads, and they were all just like almost all of them were just not doing well.
Yeah, I love it.
So who is this movie for? Like, do you think it was for like 12-year-old you? Like, I was trying to figure out like who the target audience was supposed to be. Like, it's not a kids movie, right?
No, I don't think it's a kids movie. I mean, watching it now, I think it's for parents.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if you were like an Arnold fan and you were like older and you had kids, you probably would really enjoy like seeing Arnold in that scenario. Like I guess that's because there are some darker elements and there are you know some action scenes, obviously. So I feel like a kid would just although a lot of it is kid based, yeah, like it wouldn't really be for a kid.
Right.
Any other like plot holes or nitpicks that you want to talk through?
Plot holes.
For me, the big one was just the whole movie could be addressed if they just waited an extra day for the
Yeah.
girl to go back to school.
Right, right. That is so true. Um, yeah, I think that we had talked a little bit about it and him not really teaching him anything, but PE. I thought was I mean it makes sense for Arnold, but there's so much more to kindergarten than PE, and in fact nowadays PE is like you know once a week, maybe, I don't know,
Right.
twice. Like
Yeah.
it's definitely not every day. So maybe tossing in a little more learning elements.
No, I mean he's got these kids
Uh,
like jumping through tires and stuff like that. Like it was pretty serious business.
right, right.
Overall thoughts on the movie?
I loved it. Watching it again, I was like, I remember loving it. I loved it watching it again. I could see how nowadays, I say it's for parents, but I could also see like nowadays, we all, especially when you have toddlers, you watch movies after they go to bed. Like that's really your only time. I could
Mhm.
also see that element where you're like, this is the last thing that I want to watch because I've just been dealing with this all day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, it felt so relatable, but I could also see how people are like, "Ah, I don't want to watch what I just dealt with all day, you
Yeah,
know?
totally. Yeah, no, I agree. I really liked it too. I was glad, it was fun to watch it for the first time and like think about it through the lens of a parent. Yeah, I do. I feel like it makes more sense if you're an Arnold fan and you have kids. It's probably like the sweet spot for you. You know?
Right. I do. I feel like I miss, we always say like, you miss things from your past and childhood. He was, there's just something about Arnold, like as an action hero. And this was like his soft moment. I guess you've got like the Ryan, not to name call, but you've got a handful of like actiony stars. There was just something about Arnold as an action star that, of course, he was. He's this giant bodybuilder. But
Yeah.
then, like, the big flip of the kindergarten teacher was such a massive, like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, how funny. Like,
Well, there's
everyone
really no
kind of,
there's no Arnold now, right? Like who do you
no.
who do you put in this movie today, right? Like I don't know.
You got The Rock, and
Yeah, I
it's
guess The
just
Rock.
like
Yeah.
Jason State, The Rock is kind of that. It's who,
Yeah, I guess that would be the most equivalent. Like I feel like you could have like a Chris Pratt and that would be like funny for different reasons, but he wouldn't have the same like gravitas or like shock that he's a teacher, but you'd have to have some kind of like the action stars of today other than The Rock just aren't really doing Arnold type stuff.
yeah. And there was just something about Arnold. There's such a poise about him. The Rock is great. Feels very like such a movie star in like everything he does.
Hmm.
Whereas Arnold always he just feels like a fish out of water. Like he's from Austria. It's this big accent. Like
Yeah.
just being in movies, it felt like he was working really hard and you
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
cheer him on and like, The Rock just walks in like The Rock and just destruction, and Arnold, you really felt for him, even as an action hero, that he was really working hard in everything that he was doing.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you? Anything that you want to share or promote?
Yeah, so Instagram is at Devin McGovern. TikTok is at Devin.McGovern. And I'm going to be creating some more content around being a parent, Devin the dad, and, looking to launch no compete here, launch a podcast just talking about parenting and my journey. And then working on a children's book towards the end of the year as well.
Oh, love it. Yeah, I'll link to all that in the show notes.
So, yeah, so it's some good stuff.
Awesome. All right, Devin McGovern, ladies and gentlemen. Devin, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.